Good afternoon. We are reading the portion called Mishpatim, which follows the story of the Decalogue, the giving of the Torah. Torah was given on Mount Sinai almost 330 years ago. And we review it every year, actually twice a year, the whole story of the giving of the Torah. And after we read about the Decalogue, the giving of the Torah, you read the parsha called Mishpatim that deals with civil laws, torts, and all of those things. Unfortunately, most of the Jewish people are uninformed as to the belief system of other groups other than the traditional groups that call themselves Orthodox. The problem that we Jews face is not ignorance, but the fear that questions somehow or other legitimize conclusions that go against the tradition. There are many people who question certain facts and certain beliefs based upon incomplete evidence or attitudes that are found in intelligentsia, in the soft sciences, history, psychology, anthropology, archaeology. The soft sciences are the bedrock of beliefs that run contrary to Jewish beliefs. Recently, I talked about the wonderful book by Alexander Houle, where he demolishes the timeline that is accepted by most historians in the world, where he shows that the basis of the timeline is actually a document written by Jews in Elephantine, and they talk about the emperors, Greek and Persian, who ruled at that time, and he shows you that the timeline that is given by the traditional historians, that has the temple destroyed at 586 before the Common Era, and the restoration of the Jewish Commonwealth around 516 before the Common Era, is all false, and that the Seder Olam narrative is actually more correct, incredibly more correct, than anything that historians will show at you, will throw at you. The Torah is unlike any other document that exists outside, because it is the only document where there exists an oral interpretation of the script, and it has a text that is unaltered for 3,330 years. Oh, but Rabbi, there's the different versions. The different versions have less than 1/10 of 1% deviation in the written aspect of the written law. That's the most deviations that they found. They have what is called the Leningrad Codex, where the difference between the Leningrad Codex and traditional Sefer Torah is a difference of 300 letters in a document that's 304,805 letters, or 1/10 of 1%. That's the difference. Most Sefer Torah have a variance of anywhere between 1 and 9 letters. That's it, out of 304,805 letters. In fact, somebody tried to deal with the various different documents of the Torah that were discovered, both in the from the Dead Sea Scrolls, for whatever was remnants they have over there, and other scrolls that were found that were quite old, that deviated somewhat from our Masoretic text that we have. And this person used a computer to determine by majority rule, the same rule of law, rule of thumb, that Rabbi Abulafia used in the 12th century to determine what the actual written Torah was supposed to be. And he wound up with a total deviance of 4 letters, and he had the same Torah that is read by Yemenite Jews for the last 2,500 years. In other words, the Torah that we have is as close to the original that we got 3,330 years ago as humanly possible. So, the Torah was given at one point by God in the Arabian Peninsula, northwestern Arabian Peninsula, not in Sinai, as people think Sinai Peninsula. Sinai Peninsula doesn't have a mountain that could be close to be considered Mount Horeb, Mount Sinai. But in Saudi Arabia they do. They have a double peak where there's volcanic ash on the top and a place where there's altars. There is Hebrew writ and all different kinds of artist works that indicates bull worship, which of course happened with the golden calf. And that's found in northwest Saudi Arabia, and that's where the Torah was given. The question is, why, after the story of the Decalogue, do we have the Parshas Mishpatim, which doesn't deal with interesting stuff? It only deals with, boring stuff. Somebody hits somebody, somebody sends a fire, burns somebody else's property down, bailiffs, how to deal with slaves, how to deal with people who injure other people, injuries, the responsibilities, the obligation to give free loans, and so on and so forth. These are nice, rational things, but they don't compare to the spiritual teachings of the first book of Genesis, and certainly don't tell us the range, the marvelous range of the spiritual experiences that are found in the Kabbalah. How can we go from the giving of the Torah, which is the first prophetic, universal prophetic experience that the people of Israel got, and instead of dealing with prophetic elements, prophetic matters, we deal with mundane civil laws. So, let me tell you a story. It says in the Midrash, rabbis tell us, that before God gave the Torah to the Jewish people, God went to all of the nations of the world and asked them, do you want to take the Torah? And each one of them had a reason not to accept the Torah. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never seen a document that any nation of the world claims that a God, an Israeli God, came to them, offered them a Torah, and they refused. It's not found anywhere. There's no corroborating evidence for that. So this is something made up. It's not found in the Torah directly. So there are those who want to say, by the way, that there was a man called Hammurabi. Hammurabi was an emperor. He was contemporaneous with Abraham. And some people even want to speculate that Abraham and Hammurabi were one and the same. Some people want to say that Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, was Hammurabi. But one thing for sure, Hammurabi had a code. And because Hammurabi had a code of ethics, a code of law, historians want to say that this was a precursor to the laws of the Torah. Not true. Hammurabi's code is far more complex, far more detailed than the Torah. And therefore, Hammurabi's code is actually a development from the original code of law of the Torah. The question is, what exactly existed prior to the giving of the Torah? So we have an argument between Maimonides, Rabbi Moshe Ibn Maimon, and Nachmanides, Rabbi Moshe Ibn Nachman, known as Ramban and Rambam. Rambam, the great Rambam, the greatest sage in modern times, last millennia, maybe last 2 millennia. Rambam is of the opinion that the nations of the world had to have courts of law dealing with the 6 other commandments of the sons of Noah. That the courts of law had to deal with specific religious and social issues that were expounded by the 6 commandments. No theft, no murder, no incest, no blasphemy, believe in one God, and don't tear a limb off of a living animal. Very simple stuff. This simple stuff also has about 80 details, 80 different commandments, as Rav Lichtenstein, in his book regarding the 7 commandments of Noah, has elucidated. But the 7 commandments of Noah are not the detailed laws of the Mishpatim as we have them in this week's portion. However, according to Philip Biberfeld, he discovered that there were excavations, I believe, in the city of Ugarit, or a similar city, but I believe it was Ugarit, that was destroyed around the time of Abraham, but they had clay tablets. On those clay tablets, they discovered a set of laws that are eerily similar, almost verbatim, of the Mishpatim, the Torah, the civil laws, as they are articulated in Parshas Mishpatim. So according to the Ramban, Nachmanides, he didn't know about the excavations in Ugarit, but Nachmanides said, no, the courts of law that the nations of the world had to deal with, they had to deal with the civil laws that were given to Noach, that are our Mishpatim that we have in the Parsha. Those are the ones that they had. No different than the ones that we have in the Parsha of Mishpatim. So now that you know, according to this, the original law, civil law that existed, certainly in the Near East, Middle East, were the laws of Mishpatim. These were the laws that supposedly were given to Noah and were given to the universal, to all of mankind. So when you see Hammurabi's laws are deviances from the standards of the laws in the Torah. There are differences, slight differences, in the positions of people determining what the law is going to be. And the laws are much more complex. It's going from the simple to the complex, indicating a development of the law. So Hammurabi's law changes the laws of Mishpatim, the civil laws, as they were given to the peoples of the world prior to the Torah. There were changes. And that teaches you the following. Just as Hammurabi changed the laws, all the other nations of the world changed their laws. The only people who kept the laws exactly as they were stated from God to Noah were the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, who had been enslaved for close to 116 years and were in Egypt for 210 years. Despite the fact that they were separated from the learning, the study of the law that was taught by Shem and by Eber in the land of Canaan, in the Holy Land. Nonetheless, they had the laws exactly as stated, as recorded in the documents of Ugarit, which tells you the following. All the other nations of the world changed their laws, changed their civil laws. The only ones who kept the laws verbatim, kept the standards universal, didn't make differences between kings and officials and the common man. The only ones who did this faithfully and kept the laws were the children of Israel. And so God didn't have to go ahead and look and ask people, will you accept my Torah? God looked at the books, the civil laws of the nations of the world. They all deviated. They all had changed the laws to suit themselves, to suit their society, to suit their kings, to suit their desires. The only ones who were faithful to the laws given to Noah, as you see from the clay tablets that were in Ugarit by people who were not from the children of Israel, this was the law of all of mankind before. The only ones who were faithful and kept those laws exactly as given were the children of Israel. And that's why God chose to give it to them, because if you have civil laws are reasonable. They have a logic behind them. Civil laws have a logic behind them. Because the civil laws have a logic behind them, then you would expect people to keep that law faithfully. But you see, they weren't faithful. They deviated because they wanted a change, because they wanted certain differences for certain classes of people. So these people could not be trusted with civil laws. If laws that are rational, they can't be trusted with, that they wouldn't change them, how could God trust them with super rational laws like keeping kosher, keeping Shabbos? Keeping Shabbos in the holidays is about 70 days a year you can't work. You got to take vacation those days. Jews could not earn a living under Gentile rules if they were to behave like Jews under the Gentiles. Very difficult to earn a living in America in the 1900s. Only those people who were totally committed to God and His words were going to keep the Torah laws, the laws of Shabbos and the laws of Kashrus exactly as they are stated. So God said like this: if I can't trust the nations of the world with mishpatim, with logical laws, and they change it for the convenience, what are they going to do with convenience with the Torah laws, with Kashrus and with Shabbos and with all those other things? I can't trust them either. And that's why God gave the Torah to the children of Israel. He didn't have to visit each nation, ask them. He just saw what their books were like. The law books of the children of Israel were exactly the same as the books that were given, the law books that were given to Noah. And that's why the Parsha of Mishpatim comes after the story of the giving of the Torah. Tell us, this is the reason why. These are the Mishpatim that you have to teach, because these are the ones that were kept and recorded without any changes. And because of that, I can trust you with the rest of my Torah.